Hello! Today we're talking about the brain, spinal cord, and special senses. But before we get started, I do want to say that if I say something that contradicts your objectives, or if I say something that is or is not in your objectives, please verify with your professor first or come into the lab for further assistance. And with that, let's get on with this video. To start us off, let's talk about the brain. With this exam, like all other exams, we're going to note symmetry, left from right. But since we only have one brain, how we divide that is going to be by this structure right here, which is going to be the longitudinal fissure, which divides left and right halves of the brain. We'll circle back to that here in a moment. For now, let's cover the lobes of the brain. Starting off, we have the frontal lobe. As you can see on this model, the frontal lobe is labeled. However, on other models, there is no such labeling. So it's very important to know the structures on the models that do and do not have the labels. So starting up top here, we have our frontal lobe. Back from that, we have the parietal lobes. Over here, we're going to have our temporal lobe. And towards the back, we have the occipital lobe. Now, the parts of the skull are named after the lobes of the brain, so that may help you remember, since you just recently had a bone exam. Now, back from our frontal lobe, dividing that between the parietal lobe, we have this right there. That's going to be a sulcus. Specifically, it's the central sulcus. We do have other sulcus across the brain. These are these little valley-like structures almost. The gyrus are right here. They are the raised parts of the brain. So we have the little hills, gyrus, and valleys, sulcus. Again, we're going to have this longitudinal fissure here, which divides the brain left and right. All of the lobes are going to make up the cerebrum, which includes both left and right halves. However, if we were to take that and divide the brain down the middle, we get a left and a right cerebral hemisphere. And those are the parts of the brain you need to know on the outside. Let's take a closer look. Diving into some more structures, let's start down here. This is going to be our cerebellum. We also have structures right here, which is going to be the brainstem. Within that, we have the midbrain, we have the pons, the medulla oblongata, and as we travel further down, it begins to become our spinal cord. Also, further up, we have our thalamus, and below that, we have our hypothalamus. We're also going to have our pineal gland and pituitary gland. Although, the pineal gland can sometimes be easier seen on models like this that have it colored specifically. Coming back, we have this blank space right there. That is going to be our lateral ventricle, which holds cerebrospinal fluid. We're also going to have this structure right here, which is going to be our corpus callosum. Also, if we were to put two halves of the brain together, we would see right here, which is going to be the optic chiasm. Let's go ahead and see that real quick. So the optic chiasm, when we put both halves of the brain together, we can see is right here, which is where our optic nerve kind of crosses over. But don't worry, we're not talking about the optic nerve quite yet, just the space where they come together. We also have up here our olfactory bulbs. Again, not necessarily talking about the olfactory nerve quite yet, just these ending bulbs right there. And again, always indicate left and right when applicable. Since there are two of these, there would of course be a left and a right. Before we move on, this is another example of a lateral ventricle. For context, we can think about it as fitting like this inside of the brain almost. Make sure you know this model for your exam, just in case. Next, let's talk about the cranial nerves. I'm going to go through them in order, 1 through 12. I'm also going to say their name and what their function is, whether it's sensory, motor, or both. It's up to you to create some kind of mnemonic or a way of remembering them all. Up top, number 1, olfactory, sensory. 2, optic, sensory. 3, ocular motor, motor. 4, trochlear, motor. 5, trigeminal, both. 6, abducens, motor. 7, facial, both. 8, vestibulocochlear, sensory. 9, glossopharyngeal, both. 10, vagus, both. 11, accessory, motor. And then all of these are number 12, our hypoglossal nerve, which is a motor. And that concludes the cranial nerves. Next, let's talk about the spinal cord. To begin, we always want to talk about symmetry. So this is going to be the anterior side. This is the posterior side, making this left and this right. I won't always indicate it as I'm going through these structures, but it's important that you write it every time on your lab exam. Next, we have white matter here and gray matter here. Now, it's important to know white matter from gray matter because there are certain structures in each type. Beginning here, this is going to be our posterior column. We also have a lateral column and an anterior column. Following a very similar naming scheme, the gray matter has posterior horns, lateral horn, and an anterior horn. We're also going to see this kind of bridge-like structure. That's going to be the gray commissure. That kind of hole or divot that runs between, that is going to be the central canal. Coming a little farther down, we see here, that is going to be our ventral or anterior root on either side. We're also going to have a dorsal or posterior root, again, on either side. In that, we're going to have our posterior root ganglion as well, and that's that kind of bulbous structure you see there. Next, we're going to have these here coming through the posterior side is going to be our afferent sensory neurons, and that's afferent with an A. We're also going to have our efferent motor neurons, and that's efferent with an E, coming out of that anterior side. And those are the structures of the spinal cord. Something that's important to note on both the brain and spinal cord is that these are the two things that make up our central nervous system. The central nervous system is covered in our meningeal layers. Those meningeal layers are going to be the dura mater, arachnoid mater, and pia mater. Since not a lot of our models kind of show that, always know that the layer that's directly touching the brain or the spinal cord is the deepest layer, which is going to be the pia mater. Superficial from that is going to be the arachnoid mater. It's called that because it kind of looks like spider webs. And the most superficial layer is going to be the dura mater, which can sometimes be seen on dissections. So it's important to know how they go, superficial to deep, deep to superficial, and then also if it's indicating directly pointing on the brain or spinal cord, and it's asking you for a layer, it's more than likely talking about the pia mater, since that is the layer that directly interfaces with both parts of the central nervous system. Next, let's talk about the eye. So there are two eye models that we can use. This one here, that is primarily just one piece, and this here, which as you can see, comes apart into many different pieces. It's important to know the structures on both of these models, as either one could be on your lab exam. But for sake of this video, we'll be primarily using this eye model here. So let's go ahead and get started. To start us off, there are a few things we need to know. Primarily, being that there are some tunics or layers, and then there are structures. Tunics would be the fibrous tunic, the sensory tunic, and the vascular tunic. The fibrous tunic, structures within that, are going to be this right here, which is going to be the sclera, and this clear part here, which is the cornea. So both those are going to be in the fibrous tunic. If I'm pointing here and asking you for a layer, I would be talking about the fibrous tunic. Whereas if I was pointing here and asking for a structure, I'd be talking about the cornea. Moving on from that and going a little bit deeper, we have this here, which is going to be our vascular tunic. You can kind of see that because all this vasculature here. Here, we have our choroid, which is going to be this primarily purple structure here. And then we're also going to have ciliary bodies. Now, on this model, our ciliary bodies are going to be this right here. If I were to use this model, this pink part right there would be that ciliary body. It's also on that side, right there. Also on this model, we're going to have our iris, or the colored part of our eye. We're also going to have our pupil right here. And then behind that, the solid structure here is going to be the lens. On this model, the lens looks like this. Next, we have the sensory tunic. So all of this is the sensory tunic on this model, and this right here is a sensory tunic on this model. This is going to be the retina, which is the structure in the sensory tunic. We're also going to have our macula lutea, which is this circle right here, and then the fovea centralis, that yellow dot, which is the innermost circle right there. We're also going to have the optic disc, where the optic nerve comes out. We're also going to have suspensory ligaments right here that hold the lens. On this model, our suspensory ligaments are here and here. Additionally, we're going to have segments and chambers. We have the posterior segment from behind the lens all the way back, and the anterior segment from this part of the lens up to where the cornea would be. So that's going to be the posterior and anterior segment. But the anterior segment is further divided into posterior and anterior chambers. From about here to here is going to be that posterior chamber, and from about here to here is going to be that anterior chamber. And again, we're always imagining it going out to the cornea, even though this model does not have that cornea right there. Additionally, we have certain liquids that fill up these segments and chambers. This right here that goes in the posterior segment is going to be the vitreous humor. And inside this anterior segment here is going to be aqueous humor. And those are the structures of the eye. Next, let's talk about the ear. Starting with this outer ear here, we have this structure, which is going to be the auricle or the pinna. We also have this structure right here, which is going to be the external auditory meatus. We're also going to have this here, which is going to be the auditory canal, not to be confused with this structure here, which is the auditory tube. It's also called the eustachian tube or pharyngotympanic tube. Additionally, we have this right here, which is going to be our tympanic membrane. Let's go ahead and take a closer look at this structure. So as I said before, this is going to be the tympanic membrane. We also have these bones that are on top of it too. We have our malleus, which is this bone right here, and then the incus, which is this bone right here. Those bones are going to articulate with this bone here, the stapes. Additionally, underneath the stapes right there is going to be the oval window. We also have underneath a round window. Moving on from that, we have our vestibular apparatus, all of this here, which contains the semicircular canals and the vestibule. We also are going to have the vestibular cochlear nerve, which connects this vestibular apparatus and the cochlea, which is this structure here. And so all of those combined make up the structures you need to know for the ear. Lastly, let's talk about the skin. So for the skin, you need to know encapsulated and unencapsulated nerve endings. For your encapsulated nerve endings, we have these here, which are going to be tactile corpuscles. We also have this here, which is going to be a lamellar corpuscle. Again, those are going to be your encapsulated nerve endings. We also have this here, which is an unencapsulated, free nociceptor. So that's going to be this here. And that's what you have to know on the skin model. Alright, so that is going to be it for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, and like always, if you have any questions, please feel free to come into the BSC, and don't forget to use your resources when studying for your next lab exam.